I was working with this dad one time, and he told me this what he did with his daughter one day when they were at the mall. So he's at the mall with his 12-year-old daughter, and she sees a pair of jeans that she wanted. And she said, "Hey, Dad, will you buy me those jeans?" Okay. His response was, your mom hasn't paid me child support in 3 months, so it's really her problem. Why don't you talk about it with her when you see her next? He was in, everything's miserable and it's all my ex's fault. And any stimulus that comes in, I can turn into something that has something to do with the divorce and then say something about it. Okay. That's what he did. My ex is evil, stupid, and crazy. That was the mode his brain was stuck in. The jeans have nothing to do with the divorce. Just like a shoe has nothing to do with your divorce. An airplane has nothing to do with your divorce. A barbecue has nothing to do with your divorce. Welcome to Being Dad After Divorce. I'm John Peters, and this podcast is about how to cope and co-parent well during and after separation. I'm giving you these bits of advice after having worked with thousands of separated parents over the last 30 years as a therapist, a co-parent coach, and a mediator, and having taught thousands of parents cope with divorce workshops for many years. And I'm the author of the Co-Parenting Manifesto and the Quick Guide to Divorce Mediation. So if you have not watched the previous episode, pause this one here. I'll put a link up here right now. Go watch the previous one because you need to watch that one to understand what I'm going to say in this one more fully. Okay? So pause this one now. Go watch that episode, episode 5, and then come back and listen to this episode because that one is the foundation for understanding the concept that I'm talking about. Okay, so if you've watched episode 5, you heard me talk about a brain issue that is a tendency for our brain to fixate on a certain perception of danger until we're out of danger, until we're out of the stress, okay? And I talked about the implication of that on your own mental health because if your brain is fixated on feeling like a victim or my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, then the problem with that is that you are going to be more anxious and depressed than you need to be, okay? So weakening the glue on that particular type of mental focus is important for you to not be more miserable than you need to be and for you to cope more effectively. That was the point of episode 5. In this episode, I want to talk about what the implications are on parenting, because what happens is while a person is in this state where the brain has this extra propensity to think my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, part of what that means is that the brain is already primed to connect any particular stimulus with a version of that reality. Okay? Now, let me make this a little more concrete and understandable. If I were to give you a random word and we were to measure how quickly can you come up with a response to whatever random word I give you that is a version of my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, this could prove our point. So if I say, let's say I say shoe, and you say, yeah, my ex was a slob and she bought tennis shoes to work out, but she was a total slob and she never actually went to the gym, okay? Or I could say barbecue. Yeah, last time we had friends over for a barbecue, my ex got drunk and created a big scene and she's such an F&B, okay? Or if I say airplane, yeah, we had to cancel our vacation last year because my ex is so evil, stupid, and crazy, blah, 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 okay? So I have noticed this. Maybe you think this is not true for you, and maybe it's not true for you, but I've worked with thousands of parents, all right? I see this in real time, okay? The shoe, the barbecue, the airplane, as concepts, don't have anything to do with your divorce, okay? But your brain is in, everything has to do with my divorce, and all of my misery is because my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, or I'm a victim, okay? Your brain is stuck in that mode more than we want it to be, okay? And as I explained in the last episode, that tends to make people more miserable, but it also produces bad parenting, okay? Let me give you an example. I was working with this dad one time, and he told me what he did with his daughter one day when they were at the mall. which was a prime example of this point I'm trying to make here. So he's at the mall with his 12-year-old daughter, and she sees a pair of jeans that she wanted. And she said, "Hey, Dad, will you buy me those jeans?" Okay. His response was, your mom hasn't paid me child support in 3 months, so it's really her problem. Why don't you talk about it with her when you see her next? Okay. So what did that dad do? He was in, everything's miserable and it's all my ex's fault. And any stimulus that comes in, I can turn into something that has something to do with the divorce and then say something about it. Okay. That's what he did. My ex is evil, stupid, and crazy. That was the mode his brain was stuck in. So when the daughter said, "I want to buy the jeans have nothing to do with the divorce. Just like a shoe has nothing to do with your divorce. An airplane has nothing to do with your divorce. A barbecue has nothing to do with your divorce. But when your brain is in that mode, it can turn anything into that, right? It doesn't matter what the stimulus is. Your brain can turn this into, this is an opportunity for me to make a connection so that I can say that my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, okay? This is a very important thing for you to catch your brain doing, because most separated parents experience this a fair amount of the time. And if you don't notice it and you don't filter it, then you're going to be like the dad in my example that I just gave you. That's bad parenting, right? Now, if you don't think that's bad parenting, let me explain it to you, okay? That daughter was just focused on the jeans. She didn't need the dad to dump his own divorce anger on her when they're talking about jeans, okay? She didn't need him to fan the flames of her own divorce angst when she's just talking about a pair of jeans. She didn't need him to interfere with the opportunity for her to have a good relationship with her mom by putting her in the middle of what was a parental conflict about money and was not something the daughter needed to be aware of in that way and to take on as her responsibility. I could go on, okay? That is not good parenting to say that. So if you're dissing your kids' other parent directly to them or in ways they can overhear, you are attacking them. You're not attacking the other parent. When the dad and the daughter were there in the mall and the daughter said, "I wanted the jeans," was her mom present? No. Did he attack her mom? Yes. How did he attack the mom? He attacked by proxy. That's what we call that. The daughter became a stand-in for him to attack the other parent. You do not want to attack your children over and over and over as stand-ins for the other parent. Now, this is not an excuse for you to go directly attack the other parent, because that may not be wise or acceptable either, okay? But in those types of situations where you get triggered and you are angry, you're frustrated, you're sad, whatever the challenging emotional quality is, it's not okay to attack your kid because you are miserable. That's not good parenting, okay? So this is one of the reasons I try to drive this point home is my ex is evil, stupid, and crazy mindset that people get into causes them to think it's okay to just dump all their anger, dump all their sadness, dump all their angst on their kid as a stand-in for the anger they have toward the other parent. And it's not okay. And I'll also say I don't buy the explanation, because sometimes when I've pushed back on this with parents will say, "Yeah, John, but I'm not going to lie to my kid. I'm open with my kid. I have a close relationship with my kid. I tell my kid the truth." Okay? But think about my example of the dad with the daughter at the mall who wants to buy a pair of jeans. I don't give him a star on the refrigerator for being honest and open with his daughter, right? It's not just, is it my truth in my head in this moment, therefore I'm off the hook of the consequences of my words? No. Because there's more to good communication, there's more to good parenting than am I opening my mouth and saying something that I believe to be true in this moment. There's more to parenting than that. And if you don't think there's more to parenting than that, you need to talk to a therapist who's competent with coaching people on parenting, or talk to a co-parenting coach, someone like me, about parenting after divorce, because the fact that I think it's true doesn't mean it's okay for me to open my mouth and say it to my daughter. Okay? It just doesn't work that way. Okay? What should he have done, and what is the alternative to this? My concept for this is called use clean language. I don't necessarily mean language that's devoid of curse words. I have a potty mouth myself. But what I mean is, if that dad in the mall with the daughter who wanted the jeans had noticed that reaction in his own head, but decided to take my advice and use clean language instead, he could have said something like, you know what? I get that you want the jeans, but I'm not going to buy the jeans today. We can talk about it later of how you can save up for the jeans, or I can maybe help you buy them later, but I'm not going to buy the jeans today. That is the clean version of the response. It is clean of a reference to the divorce. It is clean of a reference to your mother is evil, stupid, and crazy. Okay? So if you're not catching yourself with these opportunities to filter your language with your kid and use cleaner versions, then you're not paying attention, because your brain is going to come up with this stuff. You're not crazy for thinking your ex is evil, stupid, and crazy, that you're mad at them for some reason. That's normal. But it's not okay to open your mouth and say it to your kid in an unfiltered way, because you're going to make them a stand-in for your kid's other parent, and you're going to attack them, and they don't need to be attacked. They need to be nurtured. They need to be loved. They need to be supported. They need to be parented. They don't need more attacks. They're already feeling enough stress from your divorce, and there's some of it you can't control and take off their plate. But this is one that you can control. This is some of the divorce stress for your kid that you can take off their plate. And this is some of the most important divorce stress to take off their plate, because, as I mentioned in the early episodes of this podcast series, the number one thing that puts kids at risk for harms from divorce is experiencing the hostility of their parents. Right? You don't have control over what their other parent does. You have control over what comes out of your mouth. You have control over your behavior. Okay? And you can decide to use cleaner versions. Now, I recognize it's not going to be in all moments that you get triggered by something and you can come up with a cleaner version. So I'll tell you a plan B for saying something when you can't come up with a clean version and you're triggered. Just shut up. Just don't say anything at all. It's better to not have a good, satisfying response to your kid than to say something damaging to them. Okay? And it's also okay for your kid to say, look, let's talk about that later. Just put them off. Okay? You've done that before about other things. You can do that again. That's better than saying some version of your mom is evil, stupid, and crazy. Okay? Because that's just attacking your kid when they don't deserve to be attacked. Right? And again, I don't buy, well, it's true, John. Well, it may be your truth in your head today, but what are the consequences on your kid to say that truth? Okay? You need to learn that not all representations of what you're thinking in your head necessarily are the same truth. Okay? And you can avoid lying to your kid and still use clean language. If the dad had said, I'm not going to buy you the jeans today, let's talk about it later, he's not lying to his kid. He's having an appropriate response. Okay? And he doesn't need to say, and I'm mad at your mom because of blah, 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 in order to be having an honest relationship with his daughter. Right? So, again, what is the so what here? Look for opportunities to use clean language. Clean in the sense of not necessarily referencing your divorce. And I know this is hard because, like I was saying, if I say shoe, barbecue, airplane, jeans, it's so easy for our brains to quickly spin that into, this is an opportunity for me to express my misery by telling you how evil, stupid, and crazy my ex is, right? Your brain is just wired and primed to do that, and it will remain like that for a while. But you can correct for that even if you can't totally fix it in the short term by catching it when those thoughts pop into your head and thinking, what is a clean version? How can I respond to my child so that my response just has to do with what's right in front of us and doesn't necessarily make a connection to the divorce, make a connection to how miserable I am about the divorce, make a connection to how evil, stupid, and crazy or victimized I think I am. Just you don't have to make those connections. Your brain will make them, but your behavior, including the words coming out of your mouth, need to be relatively clean of that as much as you can muster. Right now, if you are still having trouble getting this, book a session with me and I'll explain it to you in greater detail. Join my coaching community because I talk about this kind of stuff. If you want to see a link in the description to my online coaching community, you can work with me directly there. I have weekly online coaching calls. And also, if you like this kind of content, please hit the like button below. If you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please subscribe. And stay tuned because I'm going to keep publishing episodes where I talk about these types of things to help you cope and co-parent effectively. Thanks for joining me.